you will need your brushes. So if you have just one brush, that is okay. But I usually use 3. So I'll give you the 3 brushes I use. There's a flat brush. There's a flat brush. Okay, guys, I just accidentally disconnected. Hold on, I'm coming back. Hopefully that is good. Yeah, so today is kind of a new class or a new watercolor. So we're going to go very, very slow and just take our time. You will need your brushes. So if you just have one, that is okay. But I have a flat brush, a really fine brush, and then also a round brush. I usually use the flat brush a lot because it gives us the very clean edge. So these are the brushes you'll need.
The front.
You will also need your paints. So if you got your paint from May, you will have 6 different colors. You'll have yellow, blue, black, red, green, and white. And they will come in a little tube or a cup. So these are the 6 colors, but if you have your own colors, please use those as well. And watercolors actually come in very different forms. If you have a pan, then you can use a pan. If you have watercolor pencils, you can also use watercolor pencils. Or if you have these little tubes of paint, you can use those as well. Basically the same thing as your tubs of paint. Okay, so as we get our supplies, you will also need your palette. If you don't have a palette, like one of these little plastic pans, you can go find a yogurt lid. Or another option is to just, if you have May's watercolors, open the lid and use the lid as your little palette. So put a little bit in the lid. Okay, what else do you need? You will also need some water. So prepare some water beforehand. I have 2 cups, one for the dirty water when I'm washing, and then this one will be for the mixing water. So the clean water and the dirty water, but it's okay if you just have one. And another thing you'll need is some test paper. So just random paper that you find. It can be printer paper, whatever extra paper, just to test the colors on. Of course, you'll need your actual paper. So I've clasped it to my easel here. But if you have tape or a rock, just put it flat on the table, then that's good to go. And last thing you will need is some paper towels. So paper towels for drying your brush. So there's a lot that you'll need to get. If you don't have everything, that is okay. We will go very slowly today.
You just asked me about the Chinese name. It's called Mao Dan.
Sorry, say it again.
Mao Dan.
Mao Dan?
Yeah, Mao Dan Pa.
Oh, okay, great.
Okay.
Like this one. So yeah, this is a peony. It's one of the flowers that are in full bloom right now. So you can try moving closer so you can take a picture or a screenshot. So this is our reference for today. Because the table is very small today, you won't be able to see it. I'll have to move it out of the way, but I will be bringing it back sometimes just to look at it. So take your pictures now, and then, oh, and also another thing you need is a pencil for sketching. Just another pencil for sketching. Okay, just a little bit more, and then I'll move this aside so we can start. But just to go over our supplies, you will need your brushes, you need the paint. So if you have the little tubes, or if you have the pencil, paint tube, or pad, or the pan, everything is okay. And you will also need your paper towel, your water, and a palette or a lid, anything plastic that you can mix the colors on. And you will also need some extra test paper just to test your colors on before putting it on the page. Okay, hopefully everyone has their pictures. I will be moving this aside. But let's get started. So we're going to start with the sketch. Don't worry about the borders. Usually a lot of watercolors you see they have the tape on the border, but don't worry about that. We're just going to do a very simple drawing today. So we're going to start just lightly sketching out the flower. If you know what it was, what the shape it was very round, very circular. No worries about where the petals are. And I'm going to make mine a little bit darker so you can see, but keep yours very light. Just general shape of the flower. I want the structure, not too many details. I don't want to draw all the petals, but I want to get the center of the flower in there. So in the center, we have this yellow little bit. It's kind of just right there. Now I'm just sketching in the primary petals. So right now I'm just outlining some of the most important petals. because we're also this is watercolor, we don't have to put too much detail into the sketch. So right now I'm just, you can see the general shape of where the petals are going. And there's also to create that layering effect. Yeah, that should be the general shape of all that we're sketching today. We're not going to do too much for the leaves. The leaves we will add directly using paint. I bring back the image a little bit in the corner. Okay. Let's see if this will work. Let's see. So yeah, when you're sketching the flower and the petals, I usually just group the petals together in little clumps. So there's one group here, which is kind of like this area, right on top. And these little groups that are coming down the side. Okay, and I'm going to move this away. Away it goes. So we're not going to spend too much time on the sketch. So if the sketch is looking quite rough, that is okay, because we will start painting now. Exciting. So the way these watercolors, if you have the tubes, if you have the little tubs of paint, what you're gonna do is you're gonna open it and it's very jelly-like. So if you look at it, it's almost like acrylic paint, not really watercolor. So what you're gonna do is you're going to take a brush, scoop out just a little bit, and then add it to your palette. So just a little bit from the tube. Scoop it out, maybe use spoon it out, and then just put it on the palette. Or you can put a little bit on the lid. Because we will, if we dip it in just like this, it'll be like paint, not really watercolor. So we will need all 6 colors. You'll need your blue. And you will need, I'll just take all these out. Blue, green, yellow, red, white, and black. So all 6 of these colors, scoop a little bit out and then put it in your palette or put it in the lid.
Since it's 6 different colors, so should we use 6 different brush to get the color out?
Good question. If you worry about getting the different colors into the mixing accidentally, then just wash it in the water, and then you can reuse the same brush.
Okay. Oh, right, but with paper towel.
Yeah. And another reason why I use a big palette like this, or let me show you, just use any plastic lid. So one I have here, just a plastic lid. This is good for mixing colors, because if you just have, let's say, it's so small, the lid is so small. So if you try to mix red and green in here, it's going to become very muddy. So if you have a big plate or big palette, then that's good for the mixing colors.
So blue, green, yellow, all 6 colors we need, right?
Yeah. All 6. And just a little bit of each is enough. So for example, this is a little too much. Yesterday, I tried to dry it, so to see if I could create a pan using these colors, but I put too much, so a little bit less than this would be perfect. Okay, so as we're getting the paints out, the first thing we're going to do is actually not going to use any color at all. We're going to use first wash my brush. And with the biggest brush you have, you're going to do a wash. So if you've been in the other art class, Jenny's probably done some inking with you guys. So a wash is just a light layer of water. You're just using water. So I'm using clean water, not too much, and just going over the areas where it is red. Okay. So just taking my largest brush and adding some water over the areas that I want to work with right now. So in the image, it's kind of everywhere that is red. You can also fill in the center, but I'm going to leave it empty for now because there's a little bit of yellow in there. So I would put water everywhere around where there is pink and red. So we're doing a wash, a clear wash. Just putting some water on the paper. And be careful if you're using mixed media, which is like the one for the acrylic painting or the sketch pad. The paper is a little bit light. It's very thin. So it might curl up a lot. So I don't know if you can see this, but most of it is wet, except for the center. Okay, once it is very damp, you're going to go in with our first color that we're going to add, which is the red. So the red that we have is actually perfect. It looks very orange, but I'm going to take a little bit of it and just dilute it with some water. So I'm going to put it onto the paper and see how it's a little bit pink. That's actually the perfect shade. So we're right after the sketch, we've done the water, and now we're going to take the red, add some water to it, and make it really, really light. It's a pale wash. So this one's just red. A little bit goes a long way, so don't add too much of the paint. Just a little bit of pigment is good. Make sure you have a lot of it, because if it's too little, it'll run out and then you have to mix the color again. I'm going to just pick up some of this water at the bottom here that is dripping. Okay, so with the red, I'm going to go in and just apply it. Just let it run down. If you're working on a flat surface, just bring it down. So that is just our first transparent layer of red. Really going to let the paint just dry. So that's why I selected just one flower today. I was going to go with two, but I thought that might take a really long time to dry. So only one flower. We're gonna wait for the surface to lose that shininess, because if we add any color now, it'll just bleed. So we have to wait for it to dry. I'm just using the paper towel to pick up some of this water that's dripping down. In the meantime, while we wait for the paint to dry, I'll show you guys one of the most important techniques when working with watercolor. And if you've already worked with watercolor, you already know, but it's how you use your brush. So I'm just doing an example here. It's not for the flower, this is just while we're waiting for the thing to dry. It's very important that the way we fill our shapes is done in usually one stroke. So for example, if you're trying to fill out this circle here, a lot of the times we try to like draw it in, so going left and right, but you really want to just get it done in one brush stroke, so without letting the brush off the paper. So you want to do it from top to bottom and just let the paint fill out the shape naturally. Same with this. So you can also just try it on a separate sheet of paper. So we have an even coating. Sometimes what I just did there, I go back and kind of rework the edges because I need to make this line very, very straight. Sometimes that might just end up scrubbing the paper and you overwork this area. And if you're trying to fill out this weird shape, start from the top. And then work your way. It's a little bit hard to do it in midair. Basically, just keep it in one even stroke. So we're working with layers. Okay, this is almost dry. If you touch it, it's not very cold. Okay, now let's move on to our second step. Hopefully your flower is dry right now. If you don't know, you can just take the back of your hand and just feel it. If it's cold and a little bit damp, then it's not quite yet ready. Although you can still work on it if it's cold, as long as it's not shiny. Look how the water has gone, then it's all good to go. All right, so the next step is I'm going to take some red and create. We're just mixing the colors to prepare, to get the colors ready. So you need one.
Okay. Hi, Jane.
Hello?
How are you?
Hi, May. I'm good. How are you?
I just want to say something to the students. 大家你哋呢個水畫咧，你要用最後嘅紙啊！如果你用晒你嘅最後嘅紙咧，你同我講，打個電話俾我 message 我，我呢度仲有 ，OK？
Okay, so what I've just done is I've created a a yellowish red, so more of an orange tone. And then on this side, you want more of just the red. It's more of a pink, cooler red. So we're just creating two colors using the original colors out of the tubs. And this one's going to be a little bit darker, so a bit more pigmented.
Hello. Hey. Hey.
So yeah, basically you're just getting, you're mixing the two shades of red. This one's just pure red. This one's a little bit more orange. So we're going to take a look at our reference a little bit closer again. So if you take a look at the photo, you can see that there's these really, really dark red areas. That's what we're going to paint now using our newly mixed colors. So just one last look at this. All right, I'm going to use a different brush. Actually, I've been using the same brush. So I'm going to use a flat brush for the petals. And I'm going to go in the red and always keep the colors on the side if you want to add more. So I'm going in with the red. Just gonna go slowly, looking at the image, which I have to my left. Going to add in the red where the areas are the darkest. And leaving a little bit of these. So what I'm doing is I'm rounding out the inside of the petal. And the edges, the way the edges look are very important because that's where the highlights are. And that's how when we look at it later, we can tell that it's the petal. Let's go nice and slow around the inside. There's a little bit of these little spikes poking into the middle. And go nice and slow. Just take your time. So I'm leaving a little bit of that blank area between the petals. Going back into that red, taking a little bit of the orange just for the variation in the colors. Add a little bit more red to make it slightly more pigmented. Just need a little bit more of that red. One way to think about the petals is that you're creating these moon shapes, and these white lines in between we're just leaving out so they can become the tips of the petals where it is lighter. So every single petal is a single brush stroke. And when I lift it, that's the end of the petal. I'm not going to go back and work on it. I'll leave the bottom ones for now and go back to the top. Finish up the petals on the top over here. And for the petals at the top, they're a little bit lighter than the ones in the middle. So if you look at the image again, I'm talking about these ones. They're very, very bright. And to get that brighter color, I'm just going to add more water. Take a little bit of this red, move it, and then add more water. So it's more a paler red. It's like a light pink. It's pressing down and then letting it taper off. You can also, while the petal is a little, or when the water is a little bit wet, you can take some of this red and add a little bit of pigment and let it just bleed. So it creates that natural shaded effect. And if, let's say, this is a little too dark, just wipe your brush to make it a little bit dry, and then just pick up that water. Okay, and we need another color. Hold on, let me just move that little droplet. So another color you will need to mix is you're going to take the original red. I'm just going to use this one. Add just a little bit of blue. Comes this almost magenta color. So this is just the red plus a little bit of blue. You're going to also add some green, just a little bit. So we create this dark magenta color. And this is going to go on the petals at the bottom, because the further they are away from the sun, the cooler they appear. So from the reference, we're looking at these very bottom petals at the bottom. Notice how they're a little bit more purple than these ones. So with my new color, do the same technique, but just at the bottom. Being very careful not to let too much of the red bleed into each other. And if you add a little bit more water to that new purple color and also a little bit more red, you can use that for the colors, for the petals in the back, but on the top. It's pale, it's pastel purple shade. Okay, and now I'm going to wait for these parts to dry. If I'm impatient, then I'll just pick up the paint and move it to the paper towel. Now our second layer is complete. We'll just have to wait for it to dry. Here's a reference if anyone else needs it. I'm just going to keep it up here while we wait for the flower, the painting to dry just a little bit more. Okay, I think mine is mostly dry now. It's a little bit shiny still, but I think it's workable. So the next step for this painting is we're going to darken up the red. So I'm going to add a lot of red to the water mixture. And if it starts to feel a little bit more jelly-like, just add more water. it needs to be quite pigmented because for the third layer, we're going to work directly in the shadows. So we're going to darken up the areas where the light is bringing us this really rich, deep red. So in the center over here, and now I'm using my test swatch, which is just a random sheet of paper. I'm testing if this is the right consistency I want. That should be pretty good. If you feel like it needs to be a little bit darker, I would say take more of this red, create a separate bin. Also add a little bit of blue, that purple. Okay, now we have our two reds for the shadows. I'm gonna wash my brush real quick. And same thing, do the same thing that we did in the second layer, which is to add these midtones. But I'm really going to darken up the shadows now. So I'm going to take the red and just start from the center, work my way out. So this one's the one that's really close to the center. And honestly, I think it could be a little bit more saturated. So I'm going to add more red, almost like as if we're working with acrylic or gouache, if you've ever used gouache. And notice how I'm not going over the areas exactly, but I'm making the center areas. So the darkest areas are where the petals are going into the middle of the flower. So for this area, I'm just going to darken the area where the petal is the darkest, where there's less light hitting it. And another thing to note is that in the image, these petals at the very bottom, they have these wrinkles or the ruffles. So you see the lines where the petals are folding, and up here as well a little bit. So how you can add a little bit of texture to your painting is if you have a flat brush like this square brush, Just wait for it to dry, and you see these little bristles. I'm just going to hold it directly above the paper and just drag bristles up, and you can kind of see the texture that I'm creating with the semi-dry brush. Not too much though, just a little bit on the edges. Okay. And as we wait for that to dry, we could start working on the background. So the background is kind of this green color, but we're going to use a little bit more of a yellowish green. So let's put this aside and wait for it to dry. New colors that we're going to use. We're going to create our own colors. So I'm going to take a little bit of green. Actually take a lot of green. Just mix it, dilute it with the water. And also you're going to add some yellow. So you get this yellow green, but keep going. Make it a lot more yellow. The leaves are actually less green than they appear. So you get this almost like avocado green. And one way to make this less green, I'm going to add just a tiny dot of red. It's more of an olive color. So that was just a little bit of red. So this will be our main background color. And I'm going to wait for this to dry a little bit more before we move on. So the way we're going to add the background is you're going to take your largest brush. Right now for me, it's just this flat brush. Just going to start applying it kind of in the background along the edges of the petals, but not filling it entirely. And when you apply it as if you're painting one of the leaves in the background. So leave a little bit of these white spaces in between. And for the variation in the colors, you can just, every time you go back to the green, pick up a different color. And then you can see how that variation comes through, just to make the background that much more interesting. You can also pick up some yellow. And I'm going to make the greens a little bit darker down here because it is below the flower, so it will have more of the shadows casted by the flower. And to make the green darker, I'm going to take the green and mix it with some red. So it looks a little bit gray on the camera, but I'm trying to create this dark green. Leave a little bit of that white edge. So now I'm just dragging the brush across.
How do you make it so dark? Do you add black?
Not black. So I added some green
Yeah.
and some red.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. It'll create, it's almost like creating a chromatic black. So the background is just a mix of different greens. They're all different hues and different tones. Green. And to create a little bit more contrast between the flower and the background, I am going to make these edges of the greens a little bit darker. So I'm going to take the green again and make some dark green by mixing it with the red. This green is a little bit cool, so it can be hard to get a really rich, deep green. You can also just add a little bit of black, but not too much so it becomes gray. So this mix is just green, red, and black. I'm going to darken the edge. I'm also going to darken this side a little bit. You can also try adding some blue and red, so to create this purple tone, and then add some green to it. So blue, red, and green. It's kind of like a brownish gray. So this side is going to be really dark. I want to create that shadow that's not in the picture, but it would create this more balanced composition. So I'm going to add some water just on the edge here. Washing my brush so like there's not these streaks of pigment coming down. Just adding some of this light wash everywhere. And then going to add some of this dark pigment. Just tap it in there. I'm really going to darken up the shadows and leaves below the flower by adding some black. To this green and also some red.
Can you go through how to get the magenta, please?
The magenta, this color?
Yeah. No, on the side.
Oh, on the side. Okay, so what I did here was just take some water and just prepare the surface first. And to get that color, I think I used some blue, some red, actually more red than blue. So red and blue. And a little bit of green. And then just dilute it with a lot of water. And if you want it to be a little bit more red, you can just add more red. So it's just blue, red, and a little bit of green. Okay, and one last important step while we wait for the background to dry is definitely the center. So we're going to switch brushes. I'm going to switch to a round pointed brush. And we'll need to mix a few new colors. Okay, so for the center, I'm going to take some yellow. And this yellow is a little bit green compared to the picture. So I'm going to just add a little tiny bit of red to it. If you want, you can also use our previously mixed orange. Just add a little bit to the yellow. So it's less green. And add a little bit of water. Okay, so how did the center of the flower look like? It's kind of dark, but the highlight, this yellow really pops out here. These tiny little antlers. So I'm going to start with the yellow and just dab it in the middle. Actually going to make it a little bit darker. I'm going to take the purple from the side, the magenta, and add a little bit. So our orange or yellow becomes sort of this brown mustard color, like this. Just slowly work it into the center. Not going all the way, still leaving some of that white spot, white areas. Now I'm going to take some of this purple and mix it into the yellow to create brown. And you can really darken this brown by adding some black. And this will be for the shadows in the very core of this peony flower. So I'm just using the very, very tip of this brush and creating a ring. I'm going to take some red mix it into the brown. And this will be for the center. And one last thing that I think would really complete this picture is to just darken up the petals, which is going to be a little bit difficult because the red that we have is hard to really darken. But we can layer it on and make the red a little bit darker. So I'm going to go in with this round brush now into the red. I'm going to make a little bit more as we're running out. So I'm making a really saturated red color. I'm really mixing it with water so that we don't get clumps of pigment. Okay, I'm going to go in with the round brush and just darken up these shadows that are near the center. Because after I added the brown, I realized that everything else needs to be a little bit more dark to make this yellow and brown combination to look more like it belongs. Because right now this looks like it's just sticking out. So I'm going to take the red that we just mixed, which is really, really dark. Oops. Just darken up the petals on the inside here. And with this round brush, you can also bring in some texture, just like how you would paint with acrylic. I don't think this red is going to get any darker, so we can experiment. Let's see what a little bit of blue would do. So I'm adding blue to the red. slightly darkened the red just a little bit. So for these outer petals, notice I'm just going from the center or where the petal recedes downwards and just bring the brush strokes out. The final little darker areas over here in this corner. And and a little bit more just down here, and that'll be the last area for today. And yeah, we are done with our first watercolor experiment. Starting off simple because we just moved from oil pastels. Hopefully that was okay for everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming, everyone. How was it? Was this hard or?
Yeah, it's hard the first time for water. For me,
Yeah.
I'm not for others. Yeah.
That's okay.
Yes.